Good day. Welcome to the CORY Morgan Show. As you might see, my backdrop's a little different than normal. I hope it's cold enough for y'all up there in Canada. Yeah, I'm going to rub it in. Hey, I get to take a break every now and then, too. As you can see, I'm a political lunatic. I won't take a full break from the politics. I'll do my shows from down here in the Palm Desert. But between shows, yeah, I'm going to be enjoying that weather. And, well, sorry. Either we lost the cover today. Boy, there's been a lot going on. You try to pick a vacation at a time when things are going to be happening, but it's just not the case. There was a massive independence rally in Calgary, of course, the other day. We'll talk about a little more. Lots is happening on the international front, all sorts of things. Dave will check in with the news, check in a few moments to cover that. And my host here, who's kind of providing this beautiful backdrop and set, is Jay Hill. He's been a regular guest on our show, and we'll discuss all things politics for a little while after that. So let's get started. I want to talk about, I don't have my easier teleprompter to work with, so forgive me. But, let's talk about Canada and the United States. They've had one of the strongest, most peaceful, and longest-lasting relationships between any two nations bordering each other in the world. And now we've got opportunistic, partisan brinkmanship that's threatening to that partnership, and it's intolerable. There's plenty of blame to go around on both sides of the border with this, across the political spectrum as well. The left and right have been playing it up. Trump's provocative, and we got to admit, disrespectful 51st state references, referring to the Prime Minister as the Governor of Canada, set things off. And I understand Trudeau doesn't command respect, but some degree of diplomacy between top offices is typically expected. And of course, the tariffs aren't helping matters either. Now, the Liberal Party under Carney's leadership, though, they used the trade and diplomatic tension to whip up a jingoistic frenzy with a repugnant but very successful elbows up campaign. And in painting Americans as boogeymen, the Liberals managed to secure an election win from what appeared to be certain defeat, less than a year ago. They exaggerated the threats and the attitudes from the people south of our border to cause Canadians to feel insecure with their neighbors. The strategists in the Liberal campaign know that when people feel there might be an outside threat to their well-being, they tend to rally around the familiar leadership and they'll stop pursuing change electorally. So the campaign was a success, but the price was high, as our friendship with the United States has taken a blow which is going to take years to recover from. It's an unforgivable tactic used to win an election. I'm currently in the United States, as I said. It's my annual pilgrimage chasing the sun down here in Arizona and now California. And since crossing the border, I've been dealing with ugly, snide, vitriolic shots at me for daring to come to the United States. Not from Americans, mind you. I'm getting this from Canadians. I share my activities in social media. It's part of my nature and part of promoting my views to send people to read my columns. And when I dared to point out on X that my border crossing in Montana took a scant 3 minutes with a very friendly customs agent, my account was swarmed with responses telling me not to come back and saying I was a traitor to Canada. I'm used to the traitor accusations, though it usually refers to my support for Alberta's independence. I didn't expect it to come at me merely for crossing the same border that tens of thousands of Canadians do every day. But this is the result of a year of, vilifying the United States and its citizens by the federal government, along with legacy media outlets pandering to it for subsidies. Horror stories have been shared of people being detained at the border and encountering hostile, nasty Americans. Those invested in that narrative get upset when hearing that the atmosphere down south actually is as friendly as ever, if not maybe even a little more. Some people have chosen not to vacation in the United States as a form of protest over the trade war. Fair enough. They certainly have the right to do so. And the number of Canadians I've seen in the Arizona is definitely visibly lower than I've seen in the last few years. The low Canadian dollars impacted snowbird levels as well. But to lambaste others for not taking part in their little rebellion is shallow and pointlessly divisive. Setting aside the politics, let's step back and look at the bond between the United States and Canada. I mean, there's some cultural differences between Americans and Canadians, but they're no more distinct than those differences between Canadians and different provinces. We're going to pretend the British Columbians are culturally closer to Quebecers than they are to Americans. Or Newfoundlanders, how different are they from people in Saskatchewan? Look, we speak the same language, we eat the same foods, we dress the same way, and we watch the same movies. Aside from some regional accents, most Americans are indistinguishable from Canadians. They might even be walking among us. For the most part, we hold the same values as well. We aren't just neighbors, we're family. The USA is by far Canada's largest trading partner, and Canada is the US's largest partner as well. We need and consume similar projects, and the geography makes us natural partners. Canada would be wise to diversify our customer markets overseas, certainly. But it's delusional to think the USA will ever become anything other than an essential partner to us. Administrations are going to come and go. Legacy media is on the way out. Let's ensure that none of these self-interested groups permanently fracture our relationship with the United States. We can get upset with the government of the USA at times, and they're giving us reason to. But we can't take it personally, and don't take it out on the American citizens themselves. They're our cousins, and they're much like us, whether some insecure want to admit it or not. Our relationship is too important to let politics get between us. So tune out those liberals and their pet journalists. And always remember, our friendship with the Americans is worth protecting. The bond between Canada and the United States is the envy of the world. All right, that's what's got me going today, guys. I've been enjoying it down here. People have been very friendly. A few folks I even ran across kind of apologizing for the tensions and so on. And again, Americans and American viewers don't apologize. Again, it's the politics. And I love politics. But it really does tick me off, whether it's north or south of the border, whoever's doing it, when we're breaking up relationships and friends, families, things like that over it. And we've got to stop doing that. The Americans are our best friends. Let's keep it that way. All right, let's see what else is going on out there and check in with our own Dave Naylor in the newsroom in Calgary. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Cory Morgan in the desert, my ass.
Well, I took a little break from the desert, too. That's where my fifth wheel is.
The only thing you're missing is a drink with an umbrella in it.
Yeah, I know. I've got some nice purified water. I'll get the umbrella later.
Yeah, I don't really care, Cory. You know why? Because it's going up to almost plus 10 in Calgary. It's a glorious, glorious week. And the Seahawks are in the Super Bowl. So why would I care?
Well, congratulations on that plus 10 anyways.
Yeah. And you loser, Pittsburgh, whatever you are, you have to go hire the Dallas Cowboy coach who's never won a thing.
Well, it's time for a change. And I'm not exactly, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not so thrilled with that coach selection, but maybe he'll pick a better quarterback than a good old Rodgers there, and then we'll get something fresh. Either way, I really am hoping for your Seahawks this time around because I really don't want to see those Patriots in there again.
All right, I appreciate that. And, you may be in the States, but the news continues. We've got a First Minister's gathering in Ottawa today. Lots to talk about. Right now, Premier Eby and Premier Smith are in a meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney. So to be a fly on the wall in that meeting would be interesting. Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, came out earlier and said if the Parti Québécois wins the election in Quebec later on this year, it would be a, quote, disaster for the country. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. The Montreal Polytechnique has decided that they're going to do their bit for the climate change, and they are banning the sale of beef in their cafeterias on the campus. So no more burgers for Polytechnique students. Another maid horror story, this time a woman in Ontario was given maid because she was obese, and that goes against all sort of Health Canada regulations. You remember Environment Minister Catherine McKenna and her 2 billion tree planting program. Well, it turns out they only planted 11% of that $2 billion figure, and it cost nearly $500 million. So money not well spent there. Jared Yager out in BC's got a story on the extortion crisis that's going on in Surrey, and calls from the town mayor, city mayor, for a state of emergency to be called by the federal government. And Newfoundland has become the latest provincial government to opt out of the federal gun grab program. So I think that just leaves BC and Quebec in it. So they'll be lucky to get a few thousand guns, Cory.
Yeah, well, and I'm pretty sure, many firearm-owning Quebecers and British Columbians, despite their governments, probably aren't all that eager to rush out and participate. And I just wonder how long and how badly they're going to have to let this thing fail before they finally just pull the pin on it.
Well, whenever they do, it'll be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars later.
Yeah, well, if I owned any firearms, I wouldn't be turning them in.
Oh. You going, is there a pool there you can go for a dip in?
There is, but I don't want to bring down my host's property values, so I'll stay well-dressed and not partake in the pool.
No, you didn't bring your Speedo, eh?
I didn't. Honestly, I was thinking while we did this, I spoke to my guest Jay, and Jane on the way out saying I should finish the show off and stand up wearing nothing but a Speedo. But again, not only the property value thing, but ruining Western Standard ratings. I'll spare everybody the marble bag shot.
There you go. Well, I hope you and Jane have a great time, and watch out for those snakes.
Yeah, will do. Thanks, Dave. And plus 10's not bad.
Yep, not bad at all for this time of year. I'll take it.
Right on. Thanks, Dave. So that is our news director, Dave Naylor. Always lots on the go, lots of reporters. This is the time when I nag you and shake that can, asking for money, asking for you to pitch in. The reason we can do that is because you guys have been subscribing. We're subscription-based. As I said, that legacy media is insufferable. And the way we can beat that and keep independent coverage is through subscribers. And thousands of you have subscribed to the Western Standard, and we really, really appreciate it. If you haven't yet, get on there. westernstandard.news. $10 a month, $100 per year. Take advantage of that volume discount and get past that pesky paywall and keep our reporters going. Honestly, if enough of you subscribe, maybe I could twist Derek's arm for enough of a raise that I could get my own little poolside spot and I wouldn't have to mooch off of others for this sort of remote field operation. But for the time being, I am here at Jay Hill's home in his winter quarters here in Palm Springs. And yeah, he's coming on in. He's our guest today. You guys remember Jay. He's been on lots of times, former government house leader, now political commentator from the South. How's it going, Jay?
It's going very well, as you would expect from this location.
Well, it's hard to go wrong down here. And where to begin with things? Do you feel ashamed having come down to the United States when we're supposed to be all elbows up right now?
Not in the least, and I compared what's happening, unfortunately, between our two countries with what happened in many instances with families during the COVID. If people reflect back, there was people that were the pro-vaxxers and then the anti-vaxxers. And sometimes even within their own families, sometimes very close friends. And they became so emotional about that issue and so demanding that it destroyed friendships. It even destroyed relationships within families, brothers against brothers. And I had somewhat of that experience in my own family. We've since mended fences. But you see what's happening, as you said in your opening remarks, Corey, between Canada or Canadians and Americans right now. And it's very similar. Like, people are so emotional about this. And as you so accurately stated, governments come and go, administrations come and go. I mean, I'm no more embarrassed to be here, with the administration and the government that they have in the United States than I hope Americans aren't too embarrassed when they come to Canada and see our federal government, because oftentimes there's lots to be annoyed with there as well.
Oh, yeah. Politicians, as you would know, don't always get it right. But it was just, this is so crass with what they did, tactically, brilliantly effective. If you're Machiavellian, if you have no principles, if you don't worry about the damage you had to cause to win, the strategy on the part last year, by Carney's handlers, I guess, and campaign managers, this was brilliant. But we're still feeling that hangover. That's why I was so shocked I crossed the border. I shouldn't have been that shocked. I mean, I'd be nice to stir people up. I get social media abuse. But just for having crossed, like, holy cow, I didn't even prod at you guys. Like, come on now.
Yeah, exactly. And it was much as your experience was the same as ours. We had all these worrisome stories coming out, primarily out of Ontario and Eastern Canada, about, oh my goodness, like, you don't dare want to go down there. I mean, you end up in jail or something. I mean, ICE will be waiting for you at the border. Snowbirds beware. And, our experience was like yours. If anything, it was easier because there was less traffic.
That was it. Because it has reduced traffic. I admit, we come down every year. I've been in Arizona. Often you'll see all sorts of BC plates, Alberta plates. You still see some, but it's visibly down. And
it's the same here in California. Exactly same, our experience. But, as well as the young lady that was at the window at the border crossing, who couldn't have been more friendlier, and welcoming for Leah and I. We answered her questions, provided our passports. She reminded us that because we were staying a certain length of time, we had to go online and register once we got settled. It was just a gentle reminder. And other than that, we breezed through. We weren't at that window for more than a minute. I didn't time it down to the second, but that was our experience. First day down here, we pull up to a stoplight. A car pulls up beside us. It was more than a one-lane road. Pulls up beside us, motions to Leah to roll down her window, and we did. And this American lady looks at us and says, we are so thankful that you folks came down again this winter. So that's been our experience, and it hasn't changed. We've been here almost a month now, and that's been our experience. And as you said so accurately in your open comments, we're good friends, and we have a lot of good friends down here, and we know they feel the same way.
Yeah, and we want to maintain it, But so, getting back to the political level, and I don't like to give a lot of credit to liberals, but still, Carney has a tough job ahead. President Trump is definitely been taking, though, an American first attitude. He wants to bring all economic activity within the American borders. The tariffs have most certainly harmed Canada. Some of the attitudes have. How, you were in the federal government for a while. You didn't have to deal with anything quite like this before, but how do you diplomatically deal with, Canada's interests, trade interests, with somebody as difficult as President Trump without, continuing to seem like you're bending over for him as well? It is a difficult position they're in, no matter who was the prime minister.
Well, exactly. And I think people respect the fact that it's a fine art to negotiate with someone that's a master negotiator, like President Trump is. He knows exactly what his plan is. I certainly don't fault him. I don't think anybody that recognizes leadership, I don't fault him on his need to represent the American people as he sees fit. That's his job, after all. A person certainly can question some of the language and the use of phraseology that is used. But also, as we said, this too will pass. I think in the meantime, you have to identify certain issues, and they've failed to do this. I believe Carney has failed to do it. They identify issues where we have commonality between the two nations, where there's a better chance that you can reach a compromise, if you will, and work from there, and then deal with some others that are more contentious, like supply management, for example.
Yeah.
That's been an irritant to the Americans long before Trump came on the scene, and it remains a big time trade irritant, because of the dairy cartel. So it is difficult. I don't deny that. Corey, I think that it could be done a lot better. I think that you certainly don't help your negotiations, and we recognize that come summertime, we're going to be in the midst of trying to renegotiate CUSMA, and we can imagine how difficult that's going to be for the Carney government. And he is not helping himself with what he did in Beijing.
No, and I wanted to get to that. So, again, there's some of the balancing of. It got pretty clear to Canada. Well, we do have our eggs a lot in one basket, just due to geographic reality, due to such a friendly relationship. But then when you get somebody who wants to be a little more hostile with trade negotiations, boy, we find out we're really in trouble. So you want to maybe diversify your. Absolutely, fair enough. But jumping too hard into bed with China is only going to aggravate our southern neighbors as well further. Again, it's tough though. China, we do a lot of trade back and forth with them as well. India, Trudeau soured that relationship pretty badly. That's a huge developing market.
Yeah.
But we can't let the fears of offending the southern neighbors stop us from trying to diversify our export markets either.
Nor should we. No, I think that there's general acceptance, even from the opposition parties in Parliament, Corey, to the fact that the correct way to proceed is to put as much effort as possible into diversifying those products, but not to say directly or indirectly through your actions to the Americans, oh, we don't need you anymore, because it's not true. It's never going to be true, as you pointed out. So there's there again, it's the way you do it. It's not that anybody's in disagreement that with the overall theme here that we have to diversify, but you don't take that step further. You're there, you make, what appears to be some inroads, MOUs, whether they actually come true or not. And this is the other question. I mean, his Prime Minister Carney's supporters are very quickly falling all over themselves, giving him the accolades, but it's an MOU, right?
Yeah.
It's a memorandum of understanding. It's not an agreement. It's not a trade deal as per se. It's a first step, a good one. I grant you. But then he took it that step further, didn't he? And he said, while he was there in Beijing with the Chinese, the communist Chinese, he says, oh, well, this is a good step towards a future partnership, if you will, for what was it? A world order, new world order, Well, why was that necessary? That's almost like taking a pointy stick and sticking it in Trump's eyes and saying, okay, enough of the Americans. We're going to make this new world order with the communist Chinese. Well, I don't recall Carney being elected to do that.
No, and those particular three words like that, the question is whether it was intentional or not, because that's a very loaded term. Some people read that very much into the World Economic Forum or globalism. I mean, it could be, if you just took it on surface, benignly said, it's just terms you use for, but, politicians at that level usually are carefully planning their words. I mean, Trudeau was a little more of just stepping on his tongue when he would speak out, but Carney is a little controlled. So what do you think his intentions were on throwing that grenade into the discussion?
Well, I think it was to sort of exert himself as this world leader. And he was intent upon, furthering that image as of himself. I don't know how widely that's shared. Obviously, in Eastern Canada, Central and Eastern Canada, it's shared sufficiently that he won an election, as you said earlier. But we were talking about what steps he could take or should be taking, or any prime minister should take to try and build the relationship that we need. We need a strong, especially trade relationship, but a security relationship. On many fronts, justice, to stop smuggling across the border. Certainly, we've been accused of being a conduit for drugs going into the United States. It's well known that certainly the conduit for guns coming into criminal hands in Canada from the United States is well known. So all of those issues need to be addressed on both sides of the border, and they always will. And from my point of view, and I think many Canadians, you're not going to help build the kind of relationship that we need, and we will always need with the Americans, by poking them with a stick. And that's what happened to me anyway, when he went that step further than needed to be said in Beijing.
And maybe, again, that prodding at the Americans rings well with his base of support. So even if it causes more damage overall, that's what I get frustrated with. He's not looking at the bigger picture. So something that this exposed and really brought about, that kind of ties into what I want to talk a little more about too, of course, is a subject we're well familiar with, Western alienation. It became clear then for Canadians, okay, we got to diversify our markets. Something we already knew in Alberta, we've been talking about for decades. Guys, 90% of our energy products, if we export them, go to the United States, which is all fine and dandy, except we're losing money on a discount because they're a sole customer, and we really need to move product to the coast. And finally, Canadians realized, wow, we need to get product to the coast. So we started talking about a pipeline that, the rest of the country started talking about a pipeline. But we're not going to get it. I mean, Carney keeps falling back on the line that we have to get provincial and Indigenous consent before getting a pipe to the coast.
Not consultation.
Yeah, which is contrary to the Constitution on both fronts. So what is this bait and switch? Carney, obviously, all I could think is, no, stupid man really doesn't want the pipe to go.
Well, if you look at his history as, protector of the environment, if you will, and that's the the course he's charted for most of his life, he and his wife. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a choice you make. But when you become the leader of the country, I think you need to focus on, or I would hope you would focus on what's best for the country. And, I just mentioned the fact that what was signed in China was MOUs. Well, of course, there was a lot of fanfare about an MOU that Carney signed with our premier, with Alberta. And we have to remind people that is an MOU too. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's not a deal. It's certainly not a sure thing. And as many, many people that are cynical as you and I about governments would say that it will never happen. And it'll certainly never happen when he keeps turning around and promising the coastal First Nations and the government of British Columbia veto. So there we are. Nothing's changed. He's made a few minor changes about putting some of the I'll call it anti-Alberta legislation in for a period of time, taking a recess, if you will. But some of Alberta's demands of the federal government after Trudeau departed were to repeal these bills, the No New Pipelines bill, for one example, the ban on oil tankers, despite the Americans having oil tankers go by Prince Rupert and Kitimat every day virtually. So what can happen? I think it's only natural that we, Alberta, are going to have to look south of the border yet again to try to access even foreign markets. As you say, most of our oil goes down there now. Can we use it as a transit course, transit route to get it to places like India and China? It remains to be seen.
I mean, the point of a federation is to have these independent, somewhat provinces, but with agreements that bind them to be mutually beneficial across the country, one of which is free trade between the provinces, which the government has been kind of loose on enforcing. I mean, the courts ruled like with bringing beer from Quebec into New Brunswick, a person couldn't be charged, and the courts have said, well, it's a constitutional violation, but we're still going to allow Quebec and such to block the sale of beer border to border. And the authority for getting a pipeline through. I mean, you say, yes, we have responsibility to consult, but at some point, that's the responsibility of the prime minister then say, well, we did all the consultation we could. Guys, this thing has to go. It's in the national interest. I'm sorry you're not still on board, but it's moving ahead. And Carney has abdicated that, which has led to a lot of people saying, well, what's the point of the federation? We might as well be negotiating country to country. So this kind of segueing into, you've probably seen the news and things on it. The independence movement in Alberta is just exploding. I think more than we've seen before. I mean, not since the early 80s with the National Energy Program. I think it's been more sustained even. A rally of thousands of people in Calgary just the other night and people signing petitions. We're in for a year of a referendum.
We are. And this is quite a unique meeting, I might add. I don't know if there's any other situation where you could have two former leaders of independence movements for Alberta and Western Canada sitting down together to discuss this topic. And here we are. Who would have thought?
And we're doing it down here.
We've been banished. No, I mean, seriously, obviously, I am very supportive of what's happening. Although Leah and I were discussing this the other night, as I think most Albertans are, I would just caution people, Corey, before they get too far out in front of this thing, that we saw much the same support that we're seeing in those long lineups in sub-zero temperatures outside those venues. People wanting to line up and subject cold and a cold north wind to wait their turn to sign this petition to demand a vote. That's what they're doing. They're demanding their democratic freedom to vote on independence for Alberta. And while I support that, and I applaud each and every one of them for doing that, because I am very pro-independence for our province, I just caution that we saw much the same thing less than a year ago in the election campaign. As a conservative, I was certainly excited to see on social media and on the news channels every day these huge turnouts for Pierre Poilievre and his rallies across the nation. And we were excited. We thought that, despite Trudeau's exit and this new fresh face in Mark Carney, that Canadians were going to make a change. And of course, as conservatives, a change that we felt very much needed. And so I was pleased for Pierre. He put in an enormous amount of work and effort, and he was getting the turnouts, but it didn't materialize in that needed victory at the ballot box. And that's my concern here as a first step to make sure that we get way past, and we will be getting way past the numbers necessary for the petition to force a referendum and give Albertans that vote. But we're a long way, as you and I have discussed off camera, to getting to those numbers where we would need to win the referendum and begin the initial step to chart a course towards independence.
It's certainly moving in the right direction.
It is.
It's snowballing. I would say the cautionary thing is meaning can't leave it to others.
Yeah.
You've got to get up and take part, because this is, the 6, 7, 8 months it might be till voting day. They're going to go fast. And a lot of people
even those that, are not 100% sold on how they're going to mark their ballot when the time comes. Okay. They're still lining up to sign because they want to have a say. And that's, if you believe in democracy, that's a real positive development. And, they're at least saying, let's have the debate. We don't know all the ins and outs and the good and the bad and the ugly for potential Alberta independence, but let's have the discussion. Let's get more facts and information in front of the public so that each and every one of them will be encouraged to actually go to the ballot box when the time comes and to select their choice intelligently with the knowledge they need.
Yeah, well, and this will be a period of more discussion on independence than we've ever had and ever seen before. And it's happened in Canada before, but it was with Quebec. Something that's been striking this time is the attitude back towards the independent supporters. So I remember the Quebec referendum well. They were, again, please, Quebec, stay. Please don't go. What can we do for you, Quebec? We love you, Quebec. What we're getting is redneck hillbillies. You're not allowed to have a referendum. You don't have permission to have a referendum. Like that, the attitude is night and day towards how Albertans are treated when they're considering independence versus Quebec, which I think only helps the independence movement, because it shows there is a double standard in this country.
Yeah, it actually makes the point for the those that are in favor of independence, doesn't it? And very starkly makes the point, which is that we are treated differently, negatively by Central and Eastern Canada. We always have been ever since Confederation. And I would argue, as a former leader of the Maverick Party, in favor of Western independence, we always will be. I took at that time back in 2021, I spent a lot of time with a constitutional law professor looking at our Constitution and dissecting it and saying, okay, as a once proud Canadian, a proud Canadian of what I would call the old Canada, what can we do to stay within Canada, but be treated fairly in the future? And of course, there's no avenue, there's no course that we can chart to achieve that, Corey, because of the amending formula. It's impossible. A certain aspects of a constitutional change aren't just under the 7 of 10 provinces amending formula. They're actually require unanimity. Well, you're never going to get that. The 10 provinces would agree to give Alberta its due And so it came to me that there was, and at that time, reluctantly, I'm not reluctant anymore, because after this decade of darkness under Justin Trudeau, I mean, if there was ever evidence of why the West needs its independence, and when I talk, I always say the West, not just Alberta, because polls consistently show, for example, there's greater support for independence in Saskatchewan than there is in Alberta.
And they're organizing out there too.
And they are getting organized, and good on them, because we know that we're never going to be treated fairly. And I'm so sick and tired of Central Canadians saying, "Oh, you're just a bunch of whiners," and and as you say, this double standard where they get down on bended knee. What can we give you to Quebec? But to the West, it's you're a bunch of whiners and you're complainers, and you can't go anyway, and you'll never get the support. And
to your point too, and in reading the Constitution and looking at things, and that's what really creates the true independent supporters when they realize and come to that conclusion. It's not the party in power that's the problem; it's the system. And so you could change it. I've said that in a lot of speeches. That's why I often say with conservatives, as they get into it, Stephen Harper, great prime minister, but still he didn't change anything because he couldn't change anything systematically. If Poilievre had gotten in, he would have been more benign than Trudeau or Carney. But the way I put it is they'd be less bad than the Liberals. But because of the system, they have to cater to Central Canada. And when people reach that conclusion, that's when you get a true independent support.
Yeah, you get that moment, where people's eyes light up when they come to that sad realization. And you're quite right. It does not matter. We get better government, and then the West is lulled into a certain sense of, okay, well, things aren't that bad, because had Poilievre got in, and I certainly hoped he would have, and still hope he might, we would have seen the end of some of these irritants, like the No New Pipelines Act, like the ban on tankers, like getting rid of the industrial carbon tax, not just the consumer carbon tax. There would have been certain steps that he promised to do it, and I'm sure I know Pierre well enough, that it would have been done. And it would have made life a lot easier, not only for Albertans and Western Canadians, Corey, but it would have made, I would argue, life a lot easier for all Canadians. And but the core difference and why we go through this seesaw between what I would call reasonable government, and I was part of that government, so I like to think we were being reasonable, a reasonable government under a conservative prime minister, and then, of course, being negatively affected dramatically by successive liberal prime ministers and governments. And we go through this seesaw arrangement, and it's been going on since Confederation, and it's never going to change.
Well, and it's not just here. This is what's really interesting that we're seeing in our lifetimes, as this goes. The Parti Québécois is poised to win next fall. We'll see. A lot can change in politics over that much time. We saw that with last year's federal campaign.
Exactly.
But they're pretty strongly up there. The Liberal government of Quebec, or not Liberal, but that CAQ, collapsed under their own corruption, as is a tendency in Quebec as well. But part of the campaign platform of the PQ is that they want to hold another referendum. They're saying we're running on holding another referendum. Theoretically, if they get a majority government this fall, Quebec's going to be scheduling another one. This is not a sign of a functional country. If we're getting these referendums happening on each side, even if they aren't winning majority support, you've got large segments. I mean, some people dismiss it too. Oh, it's only 30% of Albertans who want out. You got 1 in 3 have said, I've had it.
Yeah.
You should be paying attention.
Yeah. And that's just heading into the conversation.
Yeah.
Which gives people like yourself and myself, it gives us some renewed hope that we haven't had, I would argue, in our lifetime, that perhaps we're on the cusp of some pretty dramatic change. Because at least we can make the arguments now and not have people discount them out of hand. The arguments in support of independence and why it's necessary. And there are some individuals I would are really helping that along by being realistic and putting forward a strong argument for how much better off Albertans And let's face it, many of us are not doing it for ourselves. And that's what, too, is so annoying about the support that Carney got in the election campaign. He got it from people my age, you know, and you wonder, okay, don't those people have grandchildren that they're concerned about, that they would, for their own pocketbook?
And they do, and I've met a lot of those at the meeting, and that's been something that's been striking. I've been a guest speaker at a number of functions.
Yeah.
And some of the polls are showing it, though, that yes, there's people who are fearful. They get, I think, in the later age, and they just fear change. So they kind of, but still, there's a great deal of folks, our age or older, who are, again, they're thinking of the next generations. I mean, we understand that there's still only so much time on the clock for ourselves, hopefully a lot. But the younger folk, this is the first time in the independence we're really seeing that grow a lot. Yeah, because they're seeing a hopelessness, unfortunately. They're saying, I can't buy a house. I can't afford to pay off my student loans. I'm not seeing career opportunities. And they weren't there before. And that's a different dynamic this time that I don't know how that's going to turn out. That.
Well, and even peaceful revolution down through history and through all the different nations of the world that have succumbed to that, Corey, it's been the youth that has been the driving force for that exact reasons. It's that sense of hopelessness, that it doesn't matter how hard they work in the modern world, certainly in modern Canada, families have to have virtually, if they're to be able to pay the bills and put food on the table for the kids at all, they have to have a 2-income family. Both parents need to be out there working, and even then they can't get. And I do believe that you're right, that it's that sense of hopelessness, and we saw it in spades in the folks that were turning out for the Pierre Poilievre rallies. You had people that were in their 30s that were on the verge of tears, if not crying, because of that hopelessness and helplessness that they're facing in Canada, and there's no need for it. That's what angers me as a former member of Parliament for 17 years. Some of those spent as a cabinet minister with Prime Minister Harper. There's no need for that. If I look at where my good friend Jim Flaherty left us financially before he died, the nation was on track after the 2008 financial crisis. It was on track to turn a corner and to be able to offer Canadians greater tax relief than we already had as a Conservative government, pay our bills, back to a balanced budget, put money into things that really made a difference to the everyday Canadian's life. And yet in the last decade, the country has taken this dramatic turn away from all of that. And Carney, despite his assurances a year ago, is continuing it. We might as well have Trudeau still in place for what we're seeing. And that's why the young people especially have this sense of helplessness. It doesn't matter what they do, that they're not going to be able to get ahead and offer their children, my grandchildren, the life that they should have in a country as wealthy as Canada.
An option for change is being presented. We'll see if it takes off or not. So thank you very much for ending on the positive note, though. We're going to move towards something positive, I do believe, out of this. Thank you for hosting us here today in your summer abode, or winter abode, I should say. And
I'm glad you're enjoying the backyard.
Yes.
It's quite comfortable. So
if nothing else, we're in for a pivotal year, hopefully for the positive, and we'll see what happens.
Well, especially as we were just discussing, for the future generations that are much younger than us, our children, grandchildren, I certainly hope so. They deserve it, and certainly I will continue to do whatever I can to push for independence for that reason.
Right on. Well, thanks, Jay, and thank all of you guys for tuning in to this summer episode. There's going to be another one coming from out in the desert in some undisclosed location next week as well. And, I just want to leave on that note, too. I love the United States. I love our American cousins and everything. but I'm not one of the US 51 type people. I mean, you know what? In fact, with families, it's best not to fully jump into bed with each other. That leads to a lot of problems, but you can still have close relationships. So, independence with a close relationship to the South is what we must have. So again, thank you all for tuning in. Watch for the pipeline tonight. I'll be on that panel chat. Nigel's doing some great interviews. Like, subscribe, do all that great stuff, and keep supporting the Western Standard. And we will talk to you on the next one.